the Reltio Identity 360 solution. If you've used Amazon or Google, you will intuitively know how to use the Reltio user interface to interact with your data. Looking for something in particular, simply just type it into the search box. Straight away, Reltio will begin to identify records that meet your search criteria. Looking for a group of records to support some segmentation use case, for example, simply use the facet search down the left side. For example, find me all the customers in California. Straight away, our list gets narrowed down to data that meets that condition. As you can see from this list here, there are many additional attributes that I could pick from. Some are displayed and some available as needed that I can switch on based on what's populated in my particular data set. Looking to resolve duplicates? Simply use the facet search view to quickly filter down to only those records that have possible duplicates. For example, I can switch on either the match rules view or the potential matches view. In this case, I'll enable potential matches. This view allows me very simply to ask Reltio to only focus on those records that have a potential match. In this scenario, it has now reduced my records down to only those that have at least one match. I can further segment this down using my facet search. For example, only show me those records in California that have at least one potential match. And I'm now down to a list of 10, which I can now quickly review as an end user. I can do that by simply clicking on a particular profile. The view that you now see is the profile view in Reltio, where Reltio displays all of the populated attributes for an end user, along with things like audit trails, crosswalks, and potential match reviews, which we'll get to in a sec. Cleansing capabilities or enrichment capabilities are built into the Reltio Identity 360 solution. If I look at address, for example, you'll notice that this particular address has a verification status of verified, which means it's been verified according to the postal standards, in this case in the US. This is completely built into the Reltio platform in terms of enrichment, so standardizing the address, adding things like latitude and longitude. Similarly, when we look at things like phone numbers, a cleansing algorithm within the Reltio Identity 360 solution to be able to identify whether phone numbers are following a valid pattern based on the country from which they come, as well as breaking the phone numbers down into a series of sub-attributes. You'll see a similar scenario with email, where we're breaking the email down into a series of sub-attributes and using a simple algorithm to validate whether the pattern of the email address is valid. You'll also notice on the right-hand side a very simple audit trail that's been started. This line here represents the original entry point of this particular record into the Reltio Identity 360 solution. As we review duplicates, you will see this view change. So let's now review the potential matches. This is where, as an end user, I can quickly decide whether two records are in fact the same or not. I can do that through the side-by-side view that you see here. I can see the rule that was used, a score that was established, as well as each attribute being put in this side-by-side view, where I can now make a quick decision as to whether I think these are the same record. In other words, I want to merge them together, take that action, or to say no, they're not the same. Either of these decisions that I might now take, I will only have to do once. In other words, if the data comes back in tomorrow from these particular data sources, I won't have to say again that these are in fact the same or that they're potentially not the same. In my case, I'm going to say yes, these are the same. What Reltio is now doing is blending these two records together based on a series of rules to produce a single view of the truth. And what we now see is our profile view. And if you look on the right-hand side, you'll now see some changes to the audit trail. Going back in time, this was one of the original records that we had. Here was another individual record that we had. This is what they looked like at these points in time. They were now merged together by me as a user. Notice when I click on this piece of the audit trail, notice that Reltio is displaying what has changed in these profiles. These audit trails just fully built into the Reltio solution to ensure full traceability and visibility for an end user as records are being changed through updates and or merge processes. The current view happens to be our single view of truth right now. Reltio never loses any information as it's going through this process of building and establishing this single view of truth. And this view that you now see represents the individual source records prior to them being merged together. You'll notice our sample data source. This happens to be the primary key, one purple and one green one. And these represent the individual records that came from these two source system records themselves. And in between, you'll notice a series of rules. These are the rules that have been established to help us build the single version of truth for this particular Reltio Identity 360 solution. So at any point in time as an end user, I can go back and look at the original source system values that were supplied for individual records. And I can see the rules that have been used to build or create this single version of truth. As an end user, I can manually edit this data to further enrich it. By placing a record in edit mode, I now have access to changing existing information or even adding information that doesn't exist. From the list of available attributes, I can now pick one and add some information. Saving this change in Reltio will now have updated the audit trail. If I go back to this point in time, notice Mackie was just being added into the audit trail. If I look at our crosswalk, you'll now also notice Reltio as a source in the particular crosswalk. Notice when I hover over this, you can see the nickname that I just added. So again, this concept of Reltio never changing information directly, doing it in the context of a particular source system. In this case, the Reltio UI itself acting as a source within the environment. Next, we'll move on to look at how we actually import and export data. Exporting data from the Reltio Identity 360 couldn't be easier. Coming back to the search screen, I can perform a search, in this case, find me those individuals in California. And very simply, coming over to the right side, I can now ask Reltio to simply export this data. This will open up a new UI where I can now choose individual attributes that I may want to export. Notice the list of available attributes here, as well as relationship types. Continuing on, I can ask for a flattened CSV file, an exploded file, a JSON file, etc. Notice various options here. And very simply, clicking on Run will now export this file. And once the export is complete, I will receive an email and I can very simply download the file. Very simple way to export data out of the Reltio Identity 360 solution. Importing data into the Reltio Identity 360 solution is equally simple. Coming up to the chocolate bar, I can enable or navigate to the console. This will open the data loader user interface for me. I am now looking at the Reltio data loader. This is where I can very simply load entities or relationships into my Reltio Identity 360 solution. Step 1 is to select a file, either from my computer or various storage locations available on the cloud. I'm going to choose a file to upload. Click Continue. Very simply, my next step is to choose or create a mapping file. I'm going to choose an available mapping, which has already been created for me. Very simply, this process is the means of telling Reltio how your particular data file maps to the various attributes that have been defined in the model. The ID, first name, middle name, last name, address type, etc., etc. And I can continue on, decide is this a full update or a partial update, etc. Continue on. And very simply, this process is now ready for me to execute. For example, I can now decide to load the data or save this as a draft to come back to later. So again, a very simple process to go and load data into the Reltio Identity 360 solution. I hope you enjoyed this video. For more information, please go to reltio.com.